Thank you, Lucio, and thank you, everybody, for being here tonight. So, a quick recap. Yes, a lot has been done in the last 60 years to put Europe together. And in particular, a lot of institutions are being created. And you can see a map of them on the right side of the panel. And together with the various institutions, a number of political decisions have been made. Most of them were driven by the Franco-German axis. But recently, that axis has been weakened, and we will see also the economic reasons behind that. And that has left Germany in a role that is, as Lucio was saying, quite uncomfortable for them, because they kind of struggle to lead in from the front, and they do prefer leading from behind. And here is the problem, because as Lucio said, the three conditions for Europe to stay together is America in, Russia out, Germany down. And what we see at the moment is, in fact, the opposite. America on its way out, Russia on its way in, and Germany definitely up. So let me look a little bit closer to this concept of the Germanification of Europe that some people are discussing. That can be looked at by observing that chart over there, the diagram on the panel. Very often people look at the European integration process only along one dimension, more or less integration. But you need to add actually another axis to make sense of it, the axis of flexibility or diversity within Europe. It's not enough to get closer together, but we need to be sure that we are allowing also our degrees of freedom. Because if we stay together, but we are not free, then we tend to start liking less and less, and eventually we splinter. And this is exactly what's going on. There would be a positive scenario for Europe, and we'll discuss later on what this means, if Europe evolves into some form of transfer union. And by positive, I mean we preserve the financial, political, and economic capital that has been spent in the last 6 years to build Europe as we know it. But there's a negative scenario in which this capital gets lost and is a return of nation states. Now, so far we believe that the muddle through we are going, we observe every day for the last few years is in fact a way to keep Europe together. And, but this muddle through led by Germany is in fact one of the ways Europe can disintegrate. And let's see more precisely why. There's nothing strange in observing that when you have a unification process, the core tends to absorb the energies and the resources of the periphery. That's absolutely normal. You have two areas together, unbalanced, a richer, a poorer. People go from the poorer to the richer when the boundaries goes down. There's no problem, as long as you have some mechanism that brings these resources back to where they were. And that hasn't occurred completely, or not at all. You can see foreign population in Germany. You see how much they have attracted, of course, historically from Turkey, but then Poland, Italy, Romania, Greece, just to quote the bigger states. But it's not just a population movement. You also have capital movement. And you can see this chart on industrial production, what happened. Italy versus Germany. If you take an index in 1991, they start together, then Italy devalues, as you know, in 92. It actually gains competitiveness, goes faster than Germany, until Germany catches up and goes faster than Italy, just soon after the euro was introduced. They get both hit by a shock, but the shock, which is symmetric, is not asymmetric, you can see they fall more or less by the same amount, is the response that is different. Germany bounces back and goes back to this pre-crisis trend. Italy doesn't. It's affected by what was called spread, but especially the policies that were adopted to cure. And they were mostly policies that were inspired by Germany. In what sense? It's very simple. In a period in which support to aggregate demand, fiscal support to aggregate demand, was required. In fact, a lot of countries were asked to go into fiscal consolidation. That is not a good policy receipt if you want to exit a recession. The substitute for that was a massive injection of liquidity via the central bank. You can see the increase in the ECB balance sheet since the crisis. But what is the problem? If you go for internal devaluations, as it happens, and you force all countries to go into current account surpluses, you see that you achieve this result. As you see, all Eurozone countries at some point recently went into a current account surplus. But then you are creating a quite fragile organism. You can see, as long as world trade expands, having a current account surplus, especially outside Europe, is good, especially as you can see, Europe has led the globalization process to some extent, which is also one of the reasons why it's under attack by the populists around Europe, because populists believe that Europe has been an agent of globalization, as opposed to being a result or a necessity of globalization. And here is the result. You started from a convergence, but then eventually, especially post-crisis, but even pre-crisis, the economic developments start to diverge quite significantly. You can see on the left panel, you have manufacturing production. You can see how dispersed is this chart compared to a few years ago. And if we look at these from other indicators, being productivity, being unit labor cost, is a very, very similar picture, as you can see from the right panel. And you know that if divergence is too much, then it's difficult to keep the union together. And you can see the result in public debt dynamics. Germany is the only country whose debt is decreasing, is that dark green light on the left panel. All other countries, maybe apart from the Netherlands, who's peaking, but all other countries have their debt dynamics going the opposite direction, debt to GDP increasing. And if you take this debt to GDP ratio differential between Germany and France, on the right, there's the light green line on the right panel, you see this is increasing. Well, considering the two sovereign bonds associated with that debt, the Bund and the OAT, as perfect substitute is not tenable anymore. And this is a reason why we believe that the German Franco axis, among other things, and we can discuss, of course, during the Q&A, is starting to break down. And that is exactly what is going on in terms of 10-year yields. You see the convergence period. We were all happy about that. Then the gray moderation, if you wish, the great illusion or delusion of the first years of the euro. Then the crisis hits, and then you see massive volatility and divergence and difficulty in converging back to where they were. And it shouldn't, in fact, because economic developments are so different that they wouldn't justify, say, a zero spread between BTP and Bund. You can see now the BTP-Bund spread versus an employment rate ratio between two countries. So let's conclude. What are the conclusions of what we are saying? Putting together everything that Lucio have said before and myself. Could Europe survive in its current form? Well, in theory, yes, that's a positive scenario. You cannot rule that out. You would have to do a lot of things, though. You would have to organize countries in Europe in three concentric circles. At the core, you've got the Eurozone with different members, not just because more countries enter, but some countries might be exiting. You see Greece out of it, and you need to allow the mechanism for doing that. You see the European Union. Again, with countries that are currently in will be out, the UK being an example, and others in. And then a European common space when you have other countries involved, the Ukraine, Turkey, Albania of the world. while you do that at country level, you have to create, if you wish, transnational regions that take the role that the nation state has had so far. And at the same time, as the notion of state dissipates, you strengthen the external border of the union. As you can see, is an agenda for the next, 20 years, and a lot of political and financial capital to put that at work. Which is the reason why, if we ask the same question, yes, in theory we can make it, but in practice is extremely hard. What country is investing its political capital in more European integration? The current champion of European integration, if you wish, of Europe, currently recognized, Angela Merkel, leads the country that has adopted the wrong policy mix that we discussed before. And Germany is even rethinking its own relative convenience of keeping the union as it is. So effectively what we say is that even if the EU were to survive this electoral cycle, and let's be clear, if, say, Le Pen wins, game over. But even if Le Pen doesn't win, Merkel wins, in Italy, populist parties don't go to government and so on, it's still going to be an extremely hard period for Europe in the next few years. First of all, Brexit will occur. Trump will be in power. Russia will increase its presence in Europe. And the Middle East and North Africa will remain extremely problematic. So, yes, we can have positive surprises. Let's not rule them out. Maybe after this electoral cycle, more political capital is put in place. We're going to have the 60th year celebration of the Treaty of Rome soon. And maybe a better policy mix is adopted by a new generation of pro-European leaders. But the reality is that these surprises, especially all of them together, are quite unlikely. Which is the reason why, to put some timeline, even if we survive this electoral cycle, the 2016-2017, maybe the next electoral cycle by 21-22 could be the last one of Europe's existence. But in its current form. But as Lucio said, there's no disintegration without regrouping. New Europes can emerge from this process, and they will be around the stronger countries, possibly sharing some values or geopolitical interests, or simply the industrial value chain, as Lucio said. And Germany is definitely going to lead that process in this area of influence. What France will do, of course, is unknown. It depends. If Jon-led France or anything like this will try to stick to Germany for as long as possible, and perhaps even Spain is going to do that. But Le Pen-led France is unlikely to want to stick to Germany, otherwise there would be negation of her own political platform. What about Italy? Well, Italy will probably try to form the coalition that is trying to be formed in the last few years with France and Spain. But given what we said before regarding France and regarding Spain, it might end up only being associated with, say, Portugal, Greece, and Cyprus. Not really a good company you want to be, so you might prefer to stay by yourself, which is also a quite uncomfortable position, especially if part of your country belongs to the value chain of some of the other areas. You can see the shaded area on top of northern Italy. So the disintegration process will lead, in our opinion, to some form of regrouping. Yes, it's not a 12-month view. It's likely to be a 5-year plus view. But the process, in our opinion, is set in motion unless more political, economic, and financial capital is put at work. And with that, I think we can open the discussion to the panel.